In the recent years is only an increasing amount of support being provided to state and local governments, and the expectation for disaster assistance from the feds increasing. Since 2005, the federal government has provided almost $500 billion in disaster assistance, and a lot of that funding goes towards long-term recovery, particularly public infrastructure projects at the state and local level. To be clear, recovery would not be possible without these federal resources. And in our work across the country, we see the dedicated people at FEMA and other federal agencies trying to help state and local communities recover. However, as many of the members on the committee know, that what we also hear is that recovery can often be the slow disaster that happens after the disaster. If you've had a federal disaster in your jurisdiction, which I think most everybody here has, you know that these programs can be slow, complicated, and frankly very frustrating to deal with. I'd like to talk today just about some of our recent work and some of the examples and hopefully some of the solutions that we see moving forward. In Puerto Rico specifically, I think this has been a case study in some of the complexity and challenges in recovery. So far, FEMA told us just last week there are 14 approved large public infrastructure projects in Puerto Rico 2 years after Maria. The problem with that is there's 9,000 island-wide, and so it's not going to get any easier over the next few months to a year to try to pin down cost estimates and get these projects rolling. What we've seen in some of these places is the rollout of new programs that have lacked policies and procedures and created some confusion on both sides. To be fair, though, it's not easy to just instantly, after a disaster, manage $20 to $30 billion in recovery grants. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and places like that have had to build the capacity to manage these types of funds since their disasters, and that's also led to some of the delays that we have seen. HUD's Community Development Block Grant Program has also been mentioned. There's also been incredible frustration at the state and local level with the speed of that program. We found just this year it took almost a year or more just to get to a place of having a grant agreement between HUD and the state or the territory. And this is just an agreement about how the program's going to work. This isn't even about obligating funding or spending money. Of the almost $40 billion that was mentioned today since 2017 that HUD has received from Congress, about $7 billion has been obligated, and $112 million out of $40 billion has been actually spent on projects. So I think this is not a pace that anybody at the federal level or at the state and local level would think is ideal. Another thing I want to point out that we hear consistently at the state and local level is how challenging it is to coordinate and synchronize all of these federal programs. I want to make it clear that these federal programs were never designed for recovery to all work together at the same time. You have HUD, DOT, FEMA, EDA, all sorts of different federal agencies. All these programs have different rules, they have different time frames, and they have different paperwork requirements. So if you're a state and local emergency manager, trying to coordinate all of these things at the same time for one recovery plan is extremely challenging. I'd like to end by also talking about the importance of resilience. This is something that's been mentioned here at the hearing. I think that the committee and Congress and FEMA and other agencies have really moved the ball forward in terms of providing the additional funding and the flexibilities that we need to allow these programs to get creative and rebuild in a resilient way. The one caution that I would have that we're seeing in our work is that it's great that the legislation is there, but these things have to sink into the actual programs and have to be executed the way you want them to be executed. And what we've seen so far is some confusion so far about how these flexibilities are going to be able to change existing programs that have frankly been run the same way for many, many years. And so it's going to require change management efforts at the agencies. It's going to require new training for employees and overcoming some challenges to make sure they're doing what you want them to do. This completes my prepared remarks. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. That was helpful. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a statement from the Department